Let's call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting of the Public Information Advisory Committee. And I thought maybe we would start by having a report from Mr. Wilcox.
Good morning. So, what has been accomplished, where we are, a little less than 2 weeks from when I presented a report to the full commission, and basically 6 business days. But we're not counting business days, we're counting when the commissioners and commission staff's working, which is about 73 days since the time we met. So let's start with some of the social media and website and all of that. As we spoke about some of the challenges at the last meeting, that we needed to get hold of all of our accounts and get it into our office and take command. So we have our Twitter. I will be tweeting from We Draw the Lines during the next few days from the commission meetings. We have, and of course we'll be using that on an ongoing basis to disseminate timely information to the public, to our followers. We have 438 followers right now, and we want to get that number to be much more robust than that. One way to do that is by following other interested parties, and I would define interested parties as different community groups, press, and when you follow them, they see that you're following them, and that brings you to their attention, and then often they will follow you. So that's one, not a time-consuming, kind of easy way to grow your followers in your list. And then, of course, that we need to be tagging our Twitter information on our public documents, on news releases, on communications to our database, and that helps as well to increase followers. Facebook, and a conversation yesterday with Commissioner Dye, and a very good idea as we have been having challenges at keeping our website up to date as we are in a transferring period from the Secretary of State. And so Commissioner Dye in our conversation had a very good suggestion. We briefly talked about Facebook, and I think at the last conversation and meetings that we had, we wanted to make sure that we weren't taking on too much as far as social media, because we have to make sure that we're maintaining all the public comment that comes in, and that we want to make sure we're getting back to people, because if you're not getting back to people, they're getting frustrated, and we don't want to do that. So we sort of kind of tabled that, but we need to we're just not going to rely on the fact that we're not able to put all of the information we want to on our website. What are the other ways that we can do that and get that out? It was a great suggestion to have our own Facebook page. Christina worked on it long into the evening last night, and so we are adding as we speak. It is coming together, and so that's something you will see in the next couple of days blossom, and information. The kinds of information that will go there will be timely updates. The synopsis from the meetings, when I have a synopsis at the end of tomorrow's meeting and the end of the next meeting, and any news that comes out, when we have a request for information, competitive bid process is announced, it'll go up on Facebook, it'll go on Twitter, and go on our website. On our website, what is being able to be posted is, with the Secretary of State, that they are responding to the legal, timely information that needs to go up. Part of the problem with how the website was set up, and I don't know all of the history, but with the Bureau of State Audits, is that it is unfriendly in a way to be able to be changed. You can't put up tabs, and you can't, so now, going forward, our staff working with Department of General Services and expediting to get our webmaster in place, and that we will have that webmaster. And I'm saying, I'm hoping it's going to be 3 weeks, before 3 weeks, but I'm going to say 3 weeks, so that in 3 weeks I can report that it is there. And of course, that will be a process in getting the changes. But one of the things that we're going to be putting on the website, and I'm hoping it'll be up today or tomorrow, is a disclaimer or a notice that will say, we are aware there are changes that are going to be made. We are going to do a whole redeveloping our website. Stay tuned. As all of you have heard, and in the many conversations that I've been having in the last couple of weeks with our outreach partners and with the press and public, that is the number one comment as far as our website. So I think it's, we hear you, and it's a top priority.
So, Rob, I didn't
Yes.
want to interrupt you, but just for everybody else's information, the suggestion to do a Facebook presence was precisely because I've been having this back and forth with Mr. Wilcox and Mr. Claypool about how we don't have control over our own website, and we can't put the simplest of updates, and we don't even have Commissioner Anchetta listed as part of the commission yet. So, I mean, really basic information, it's not possible for us to update because once they give us password control, they said you have to take over maintenance. And, of course, we can't do that because we can't get the IT contract in place. So we're in this horrible catch-22 situation. So I just suggested to Mr. Wilcox that there are so many organizations now that just use Facebook as their website, and at least you don't need a really technical person to make changes to that. So whether
Even I can do it. So
yeah, exactly.
That's saying a lot.
You don't need to know HTML. You don't need to. So just as a way of getting more up-to-date information, as part of that disclaimer, we can send people to the Facebook page where they know they're getting more updated information. And who knows, we might decide it's better even than going with a custom website moving forward. But I think it'll help.
Right. Thank you very much for that, for explaining that. And so redistricting ca.org, and that was something that was suggested in our meeting the last time, that they have some very good information. In fact, their pamphlet that is up on our website now, a link to it, that they will be happy to give us copies, as many copies as we would like, with our logo and information on it. So I think that's great, and so that you all have that when you're out in your communities and speaking, and that our commission office has it as well, and that they have offered to be a resource for our materials on their website, so that at the end of the day, and especially now when we're working with the Secretary of State, and they have their own deadlines, and when they're gone at 5 o'clock, and we're still meeting and we're doing a synopsis, that CaliforniaRedistricting.org will put it up on their website within 5 minutes. So this is in addition to Facebook and all of the, and Twitter, that we're really trying to make the best of this situation and getting the word out. The commission database, yes, we have control of that database now. We are culling and going through that list, and we're going to make sure that for whatever reason that some may have fallen off, especially the commission. I don't know if commission members got the most recent information or flyer from the regarding Saturday's outreach meeting. So we had, Commissioner Dye and I had talked that it may have been that commissioners, for one reason or another, were taken off in in part of the transferring or whatever. But so we're putting you back on. So you get to be in the know like the public's in the know. I think that's probably a good idea. Media list. I've identified the list, the database that we need, and until we purchase that, I am creating as we go along a manageable list. I have my own database, and I'm going through and looking across the state and identifying the top 30 newspapers and general interest newspapers, and then the ethnic media to set editorial boards. Also, I know the commissioners have expressed an interest to go and to get out to remote areas and smaller newspapers. That is a time-consuming process, and not time-consuming in setting up and getting everyone together and getting the dates. But it's something that I believe maximizes our efforts, and it reaps great rewards and benefits to enter into these conversations. Commissioner Forbes and I had a conversation yesterday about his willingness to go everywhere in Northern California, to the hinterlands, to Wairika and Crescent City and Chico, and so I will be working with him on that. And I know other commissioners have said, "Hey, I'm out there. I'm willing to go and to do those things." We're going to start with the top 30, and we'll make sure that we are getting out to as many as we possibly can. And I'm going to be mindful of commissioners' time as well, and I really appreciate everybody's offer to be available. Maximizing our relationship with our partners. I've been having some very extensive and excellent conversations about just the really terrific teams that we have out there, Common Cause and League of Women Voters and California Forward and the California Chamber of Commerce, and there are more to happen. They have email lists, very extensive, that they will get information out. That will help us also in offering in those communications, say, "Hey, would you like to be part of our database? Will you please join? Will you follow our Twitter? Here's what's happening." And through them so we're not just relying on our partners, but that we're saying, "Hey, join us and be part of our team," and so that we can communicate with you directly. And they have offered many resources, and I want to publicly thank them for all of their help. And Kirk was going to be here. I'm just going to just pass on the media training of commissioners for a moment, and we'll get down to Time Warner. I reached out to Time Warner because I know they have a thing called video demand. If you have Time Warner, you can go on and they offer certain videos. You go through a menu and you can see certain things anytime that you want. And they have agreed to put all of our commission meetings on Time Warner, on video on demand. So that's another way to get our commission out there. Then I reached out to the California channel, which is that's the legislature is on that channel, and legislative hearings, Senate, Assembly, and they are considering, they were very interested in talking about putting our commission meetings on the California channel as well, and maybe airing some of them live. California League of Cities is one of the government organizations that in the California Association of Counties. So I reached out to the League of Cities, and they were very happy that I did, and want to definitely get the word out to their members who are going to be very interested in the redistricting process. They have 15 different associations of local leagues of cities, and I am reaching out to those to schedule commissioners to speak to them. For instance, Orange County has its own league, and So that's going to be a great opportunity for us, and I will continue to reach out to those certain associations. On the media training of commissioners, and then when Kirk comes in, I will talk about one issue. But by the end of today, I will have had conversations with 10 commissioners. I want to thank all the commissioners who have participated for making their schedules available in talking with me, and they have been really just great conversations, and just the incredible stories and the messages and the ideas that commissioners have. I just really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Who are the stragglers?
I am not telling.
I have a question. So on the media list, I'm assuming our inability to purchase that and expedite that is related to our lack of delegated authority again?
Yes, and we're working with DGS that'll be in the process to order it, and I don't think it's going to be a long time in coming. I don't think so, and it's not something that's hindering anything that we're doing. I'm very confident in what I'm putting together and able to get, and it is going to be a very helpful resource, but it's not slowing anything down.
Excellent. Also, when we interviewed Mr. Claypool, actually, he talked about all of the database that BSA had amassed in doing outreach, that, they had spent, our entire budget, actually, to do the initial outreach to recruit commissioners. Have you been able to glom onto that and take advantage of that list?
I will talk with Mr. Claypool to make sure that if there's an additional resource that I'm not aware of, and specifically that we have access to that. So I don't want to say that it's not in what we have and on all the lists and databases that we've got, but thank you for bringing that up, because I will check on that.
I have a question about, I guess this has to do with our overall extension of time for a lot of things to be happening. And it seems to me that maybe over the next few weeks, we're not going to be doing some of the things we thought we would be doing in March. So is there any way to perhaps expedite sending us out on these media things if we're not going to be doing other business? Absolutely.
And that is why, and I also want to look to the committee for prioritizing what we need to be doing, because we have dozens of things to do. I believe that the top priority right now, as we're getting these other things going with the web-based media and managing that the number one priority is my contacting and reaching out to those local newspapers and to the top organizations and of course the difficulty with speaking engagements is that there's a lead time. So absolutely maximizing the first 3 weeks in March or whatever the time that there aren't other activities happening. And I'd like to hear from the Commission that is the top priority, to send commissioners out meeting with those editorial boards.
Yeah, I think it's very much a priority. Peter and Jody and I went to the meeting of the Chinese American elected officials on Sunday. And even with all the conversation and conversations I've had with people in my own community, I'm still surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I still think, you get that sort of look of, yeah, I kind of have a vague idea what you're up to. But, and these are people who should be, well informed, but I think they're just not receiving it. So I think even if it's just we did another little interview with someone from the Inland Empire, a phone interview for a newspaper. So, I think those things can happen. Obviously, Peter gets a lot of calls because he's so well known in Southern California, but
right.
I think it would be probably not that hard. Not that we don't all have 10 million things on our list, but if that's one that we can push to the top, I think would be a good start going forward into the educational and input meetings as well.
Commissioner Raya, I agree totally, and it's important that this is, and as you're saying, that requests come in, but we're not going to be reactive. We're going into a proactive mode now. And when we're talking about the top newspapers, and I'm not just saying it's going to be newspapers, that's going to be the first, but I'm looking at Commissioner Dye and Commissioner Forbes are doing a newsmakers interview today with Comcast. On headline news, at the end of each half hour, they have 4.5 minutes, which in television is a long time. And that is aired over and over again. So in your area, Commissioner, and I know Commissioner Ward, the local Time Warner and Comcast, they have those opportunities as well. So let me just back up a little bit. That's also in the priority, the top priority, the one and one top priorities, that those kinds of, because they get your message out to so many people, and that's exactly what you're talking about, is that, yes, there are going to be those that are interested, and there's going to be 438 followers on Twitter, and there's going to be, maybe when something is rerun through all of Northern California on Comcast, that you're reaching 1 million people. Just think of that. So I just want to say I'm in accordance, and I thank you for your comments.
I had a couple questions for you, Rob. In regards to your report, one question I had is, as we branch out into not having full control of our website, but branching out into several tentacles of social media, who is going to be the focal point to go and check each of these different arms and make sure that the information on it is current and valid and all that kind of stuff? Is that you?
That is me. I'm working with Christina Shoup of our staff. Yes, right, and we're on there going. That's a daily basis, more than a daily check, and in responding to what needs to be responded to and making sure everything is updated.
And they both have 8 arms.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Well, specifically when we get into using other agencies and other public works groups and things like that, and are feeding them information, making sure that they're all on the same page, that they've all got, the same information and that kind of stuff. Because the only thing I could be concerned about is if one set gets some information, the other gets some, and now we've kind of got a disjointed message.
Well, yes, that is key, and that's a bigger issue than our social media, and it's a good one, that making sure, number one, our partners, because they're going to be the main ones out there, they're the front lines of the ones that are going to be helping get our message out, and that they're getting the same message. They're getting one message, and that we're all, and that's why it's important to have an ongoing conversation with them, and that I'm having the emails and the phone calls, because they need to be very included in this process, and that's very important. And I echo that. They have to have the same message, and that we're all on the same page. And I think of what I've seen so far, we are, and I hope that continues. It will.
That's outstanding. I'm not suggesting, but I'm just asking the question. Given all of the number one priorities you have, and understanding that it is important that at some point somebody's going and at least every couple days checking these various sites for information surety, is that something that perhaps we could parcel out amongst the subcommittee to, I'll take these 5 sites and help manage or communicate with those? I mean, I'm just asking the question so that you and staff can focus more on media relations and setting up opportunities, things like that.
Well, I always appreciate offers of help. But I'm not quite sure if we're going to have to monitor it that much. I'm in conversation and emails with them, and and they're getting the information, and as they get it, they will post it, and I'll be checking it. I don't think it's going to be too time-consuming, and I do appreciate the offer. I have other things that you can be doing if you like.
Sounds good.
You're going to be busy, don't worry. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
When it comes to the item labels maximize relationship with outreach partners, you mentioned that a statement that there's a variety of resources that you determined had been offered as available to the Commission. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what those resources were.
Posting to their website, getting messages out to their email database, talking about with their communications directors, and those will be conversations that will be happening that they are offering to help me with media, because they have relationships that I may not have, that they're offering to help in that way. I also spoke to them about that the commissioners wanted to get out in the communities, and they offered to help identify important organizations and groups in speaking. So those were all very helpful resources that they made available.
Thank you. And were they going to be helpful in identifying, like you said, mentioned speaking engagements and things like that? I'd imagine they're a fantastic liaison to arrange those.
Absolutely. And I would love to have the feedback from the committee. We need to be, those need to be prioritized, because, and as we get better known with our message out there, and people are seeing you, and they're hearing from you, and they're reading about you, you're going to be getting more and more requests. And that's a good thing, but that has to be managed, and that is something that I will be working on a priority system and communicating with the committee to make sure, because, you know, we won't be able to do them all. But when we want to make sure that the ones that we do that also are, and I used the word, and I don't want to overuse it, but it is maximizing the resources that we have and being able to get the bang for our buck.
Thank you, Rob. The California League of Cities, I was just wondering if you elaborated on what great resources and help they've been willing to offer you this week. And I'm just wondering if you could discuss what is their charter. I'm not familiar with them, and so I was just wondering if you could explain exactly what their charter and mission is.
They have member cities from, and I don't know, I would say, I don't know how many hundred cities where they're part of this league. It's the organization, sort of their professional organization that they belong to, and it's a way for them to share information with each other and to lobby on behalf of issues that cities care about. And it's also a way for them to be able to communicate as one voice, and that we can communicate to them. So what they have offered is they have a magazine, they have a newsletter, they have a database, and that they are willing to make that available to us, and of course to have commissioners speak to their 15 local affiliated organizations, local leagues.
That's exciting. With things from last subcommittee meeting that we talked about was one of the things we identified as a priority was putting together a press kit. I was wondering if you could give us an update on where we're at with that, and also kind of a set public presentation kind of a situation.
Yes, and I have put together brief. We had talked about 5-minute talking points, and I have those. And I am working with and putting together a press kit with the information on our commission, on our commissioners, and should have that put together and available within the coming week before we start to go out to the newspapers. And so that is something that that's going to be done in short order.
In regards to getting out and doing, speeches and the reaching out to the public, I know, again, my colleagues are amazing in their ability to get out and represent. And one of the things that I know we talked about in the past was having again, kind of a template base of a public presentation, or something that we could base a speech off of, kind of tailor to the audience, but kind of have a preset template, if you will, that covers all the bases that we would want to address for awareness and outreach needs, that we can then tailor to each individual audience. Is that something that we're focusing on or
yes,
getting built?
With the talking points, and I think you bring up a really key point, which is you got to know your audience. And if you're going to go in and you're going to give a boiler speech, and it's not right, it's not the right fit. So you're going to build on those. I am here as a resource to help, but also knowing that part of when commissioners are going out, that part of making sure that the message is correct is that and I've been having the conversations with the commissioners, and this is what has been so important, knowing the right commissioners for the right audiences, because you all have individual messages, and you have some an experience that you can deliver certain messages to certain groups. There will be business groups, and there will be colleges, and the local city organizations, and the Rotary clubs, and based on the different backgrounds that you have. So that will be the first way in making sure that the message is right, that the messenger is also matched correctly. I will be working on that, and then of course work with you on building off of the regular talking points that the speech will be. And I also know that you're a good writer, and so I'm going to maybe get your help as well.
Great. That's something then that we'll write down. I'm just I know one thing that we were waiting on as I think a commission, but it's particularly a subcommittee, was your arrival and
I got that
and
impression.
an ability to kind of give us some communication direction, and be someone who sends out a very deliberate and consistent message. And it seems like if we can, I'll work with you, whatever, I know we all will this week to get that done, then what we can kind of go out and help push that. I know there's a lot of opportunities in my area that we could be speaking at next week, to raise awareness, but we've been waiting to get that communication direction and from the communications director. So whatever we can do to help with those number one priorities, get those actually completed.
Well, would you like me to hand out the talking points now, and we can? Because I think that the commissioners are ready to go,
Yeah.
and I don't think there's no need to wait.
It's okay, he's got stuff.
Could we, since we have Kurt, could we take that issue that I was talking about a little bit earlier about?
Media training?
Yeah, media training. And Kurt, can I?
Or if it's convenient, we've got competing agenda items going on at the same time. It's an imperfect world. Would it be convenient to come back to this one? I'm just a little concerned that the other one is about to hatch across the room. If it's okay with the committee.
Mr. Miller, you can't be in two places at once?
Well, that's the aspiration, but it's yet to be perfected.
I've seen him run, so I know he can.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Okay. Does everybody have a copy? And these are just general talking points, and I think it is important that commissioners also make the message their own. In the extensive conversations I've had with commissioners, I have no doubt that they can do that, and that they need to personalize these. This is a broad overview because we were talking about a short presentation. I think it's important that we talk about, what the commission is, why the commission is important, and what the commission is charged with. In the conversations and what I've been hearing and from commissioners and from other of our partner organizations is, and as we've heard public comment in Claremont, there is confusion. And our message, and Commissioner Ward, and I hope that this helps, in that I know that you want and the commission wants this focused message, what the commission is going to be doing, and how you are charged with doing your job, the considerations in drawing the districts, and also the timeline, the process, the outreach, the educational meetings, the input meetings, the draft maps, and then that this is all done in August, that people have this very overall picture. I think it's important that we don't get bogged too much in process. If there are questions about, well, so how were you chosen, and how did you apply, and how do you, that those can be answered. But I think that we need to engage the public on the overarching that we are commissioners, we are just like you. The process is not political anymore. It's not run by political parties. We're listening to you, and this is how we're going to be doing our job, and this is why it matters.
So I think putting a good set of FAQs, frequently asked questions, together will be key, just to match it with this.
Right, and we have some of those and compiling those, and those will be ready to go next week as well.
Okay. Would it be helpful if we brainstorm some of these typical questions? Because I'm sure all of us have started to receive some of these questions.
I think that would be great.
Do you want to spend a few minutes just brainstorming? Like one that I noticed that is addressed a lot in literature from some of our partner organization is, what's the difference between reapportionment and redistricting?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one question. Another one, I mean, I think, we should use the opportunity to show some humor in the way some questions are asked, because, this can be posted on our website. So, one comment I got from a friend I was having dinner with was, well, isn't this something that just could be done by a computer program? I mean, you have census data, and you could just run the program and divide the districts evenly. So, wouldn't it be faster and easier and fairer to have a computer program do it and then just put in the different criteria? So just to kind of, I think it's important to explain the judgment that's required, because so much of the information that we are going to use to draw these districts actually is not available in census data and can only come from public testimony. So that could maybe kick off a discussion about the need for public input.
I know one consistent question in every media address so far has been, you're a bunch of political amateurs. Why should Californians trust you guys with the responsibility of redistricting?
Right.
Instead of trained professionals?
And that is something I know I've discussed with all of the commissioners here in this room, and in fact, and Commissioner Forbes had some great thoughts yesterday on that, as you all have, and also Commissioner Raya, because she was asked this question on Channel 4 in Los Angeles, KNBC news conference, because I watched it. I watched it, and it was a good answer, but then she shared something with me that I'd like to bring up now, and she said afterwards, because she was bothered by that word amateur. And of course, we're all saying, hey, the political thing is easy to talk about. No, you're not politicians, and that's why the people voted for this. But the amateurs, and of course, you're not amateurs and you have this incredible background, but she looked up the definition of amateur in the dictionary.
Yeah, I read the whole thing, and this is what I came to from reading the definition. Because I kept thinking, my husband's a big sports fan, and I kept saying, why are amateurs being denigrated? Mm-hmm. And it's actually a person who does something for the love of doing it may be just as well trained and have the same level of expertise as a professional, but doesn't get paid for it. Mm. So.
Yeah, I mean, Olympians are all amateurs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's good.
Get the sound bites.
That's a new one. And I like it. Okay.
In fact, they're required to be amateurs to compete.
That's right.
Right.
Right, as you're required not to be, political politicians and elected officials.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One question that comes up a lot is, how are you guys going to come to agreement? I mean, you were picked by partisan subpools, and you were picked to be different. How are you going to actually come to agreement?
And these are also some of the questions that I've taken out of my interviews with all the commissioners as well, because that's something that I think that I believe we all talked about. I've talked with most commissioners about when you get the question, how are you going to be able to come to agreement? Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. One of the questions, and we heard this to a certain extent in Claremont, but I hear it from a lot of people, is who has the last word on the maps?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right, we did hear that. And I think at that point it's worth pointing out that it's illegal for legislators to talk to us. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people realize that.
Unless they're suggesting a place we can have dinner.
On the topic.
I think also one of the things that I've been hearing as a question is, and we talk about it in the talking points, but I think it's an important question, is what's the criteria that how you're going to be drawing these districts that you need to pay attention to, because it's very clearly set out in the Act.
Right.
Yeah. How will you decide is actually the question, and one of the and it often comes on the heels of, how will you come to agreement? One of the things that I always point out is that the Voters First Act is actually quite prescriptive. There's a clear precedence and ranking of each of these criteria. So, there is an understanding that there are going to be conflicts, when applying each of these criteria, but there's a clear rank order that we have to consider.
I think an important question that I've heard that I think everyone in the Commission probably needs some guidance on from you is how is the Commission finding communities of interest, and how are they defining that term?
I think a question is also to compare us to how it's been done in the past versus the openness of this procedure, and that gives us an opportunity to make reference to the Facebook, the Twitter, and all the other ways they can access what we're doing.
So another question that comes up is one of the criteria or one of your goals to create more competitive districts? And that's kind of a loaded question. And usually my response to that is not one of the criteria, in fact. However, given that only one seat has actually changed parties in the past 10 years, it cannot help any new plan will probably be more competitive.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Mike.
Thank you. That it's not criteria, but it's probably a natural byproduct of the process, right?
I like that, byproduct.
Byproduct, yeah. When you consider that the projects were set up to protect the incumbents.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
that was one of the questions from the Congressional Quarterly, which is incumbency protection, part of no longer part of the equation or whatever. I remember being quite shocked to read that it was considered to be a standard redistricting principle. Incumbency protection is one of the standard redistricting principles. So I made it clear that it's not one of ours.
Right. And again, as that's actually written into the act, shall not be drawn favoring or discriminating against an incumbent candidate or political party.
I have found it in the interviews I've taken, it's been useful to carry around that one page of Prop 11 so you can read it to them.
Right. And also, one of the things that you were talking about that when Kirk comes back is carrying around, one thing is what you can't talk about. So we'll talk about that when Kirk gets in, because that's so important. And I think it's important to set that up front with and I do that with our reporters, and so that they have the expectations. And we've had this conversation. Doesn't mean they're not going to ask you the question. They still may ask you the question to see, because, reporters, if they get an exclusive or you slip up, that's news. And they're not that they're trying to get you to slip up, but if it happens. But we do want to make very clear, and also to the public when you're out there speaking, as this is what the law says that I can and cannot talk about.
And it's a natural thing for them to have curiosity, because if you're a local paper, you want to know how this is going to affect your local person. And,
Absolutely.
you can't go there.
Absolutely.
I think that kind of brings up something that we need to be thinking about when we are creating messages, and that is that this can be just so incredibly dry. And if we are always just saying, well, here's the factors, and I can't talk to you about anything else, we're not going to be making the connection that we want to make.
One thing I talked to Rob about yesterday was that stuff like, why do I care? And this is something sort of, for me, philosophically. I mean, I truly believe that given the challenges that both locally, statewide, and nationally we're facing over, that this redrawing of the lines is the most important one, probably since I'm not sure when, because the decisions that will be made over the next 10 years have to be made. I mean, we've kicked the can down the road as long as we can, and now is the time to decide. And so these are the districts that are going to make the difference as to how we address these really major issues that the country faces.
Yeah, I mean, I think the why should I care question is really, really important, and that's fundamentally what we need to be answering in all of our speaking engagements, particularly in the next month, because, as Commissioner Raya pointed out, even people who are elected officials don't seem to be that in touch with what's going on here. So, for the average, disengaged voter, it's even more important that we come up with a really compelling message in terms of why they need to care, that it's fundamentally about truly representative government and getting people, who represent your interests to sit down at a table and come up with solutions, because there are going to be some very difficult choices facing the state moving.
I think that if we're going to go speak to a particular audience, is again crafting the message for the audience. If you can come up with a topic that they will care about, and say, would you like, for example, this they're not directly related, but let's say if you're talking to a group of farmers in the San Joaquin Valley who care about water and they don't care about fish, do you want to have your district controlled because of population things by Berkeley? I mean, is that what you want? I mean, so you need to be there so that your point of view is represented and not distorted or diluted by how the lines get drawn. I mean, and you can find topics like that will resonate with a particular audience. Find out just one example of something they don't want to have happen.
Right. That's right.
And that would that be an example of
Yep.
of why they should care about this.
Well, and they've shown in study after study that people unfortunately, they respond to fear messages.
That's right.
Much more dramatically. It's just human nature to respond to the idea of loss in a much more dramatic fashion than to respond to some incremental positive improvement. So I think it goes back to researching your audience and understanding what issues are important to them and then framing it in a way to help them see why redistricting can directly affect whether those interests are represented in the way that they would like.
Right. And getting back to what Commissioner Araya said about the dry message, and that is why I want to come back to why we're having the individual conversations with commissioners, is that one of the way to engage the public is personal story. And they want to know who you are. They want to know why you're involved. Why do you care? You have engaging stories to get people interested, and that's where I think that comes into play, into make sure that the messages are not dry and they're just not facts and figures, because anybody can go out there and give a facts and figures speech, and we have groups that are going out there and they're talking about that. But you have your stories that I think that can engage the public.
Other thoughts on questions you've been asked that we should have a handy-dandy answer for?
And I will cull through the others that we have and that I've been collecting from the commissioners. And
Yeah, I sent you all my notes from my interview, and that was, a very typical journalist kind of interview where they're, kind of pointed questions and maybe a little loaded. So
it's very interesting in looking at the interviews, the Congressional Quarterly and some of the others, and going back to, was it December, Commissioner Raya, when you did the news conference, the Channel 4, I think?
I think it was.
Right. That there are some very core questions that the media is interested in and is asking over and over again.
So one of the things I was curious about that you didn't mention in this list, I know that when we talked with you in your interview, that one of the ways, there's been a lot of emphasis on the internet as a way to get out to folks, and it's certainly very important. But there's some very hard to reach areas, and certain hard to reach groups. Radio is probably the most effective way to get out. Can you talk to us a little more about
Right, and I apologize then, because I thought it was in on the radio that I am compiling in our list and our top hit list at looking at reaching out to radio, and on my database and list, I know that the top reporters, especially in the public radio, the NPR affiliated stations that have good listenership and have the types of programs. And I have individually talked to some of the commissioners about programs in their area and the radio stations in their area, and I know Commissioner Forbes has done radio up here, and that when I mention television and newspapers, I'm remiss in fact, it's one of my most favorite ways to communicate. There was some study that came out 2 or 3 years ago that as 90%, and this is going to change with time because people have iPods and all of this, but that 90% of the public tunes into the radio probably five minutes a day. And when you have traffic reports and the news reports and that, and so it is a great way to communicate with a lot of people.
There was just this last weekend, I heard a comment that, so I'm sure it's some NPR fundraiser, that talked about how 20 million people watch the evening news. on a regular basis. 27 million listen to NPR.
Right.
And I thought, I mean, why haven't you been on Michael Krasny's show yet? On KQED.
When we talk about radio, we should also keep in mind that there are a lot of radio personalities who appeal in particular to the youth. And I think, and a lot of them, especially in the ethnic community, are very interested in causes. So I think this is something where we could enlist a broader audience.
Two questions for you. One, I just echo what Commissioner Roy was saying. I know XM and Sirius have a lot of specialty channels, that cover this type of governance, and they're always interested in content. So I don't know if those sources we've looked to reach out to. And also, I was aware that we had a Clear Channel contact, and I was wondering if we had been in contact with that avenue, and if anything's turned up from that.
We have not. I have not been in contact with the Clear Channel contact, and I will look into that.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't limit it to NPR.
No.
That attracts a certain demographic, and if anything, I like the idea of enlisting DJs and other personalities, talk show hosts who are very popular, and they have their own franchises and own audience, and it would mean something if they said redistricting was important. More on the radio?
Nope.
I had another thought, and we had a brief exchange about this in terms of maybe putting something on our business cards on the back side. And one of the things I had suggested to Mr. Wilcox was that maybe we should just have that statement of what we can't talk about on the back of our business cards, and that way when we hand our business cards, they flip it around, it will say that. And I thought you had a better suggestion, which was to maybe have some key messages on the back, more positive messages that are about our mission. I was wondering if you had further thoughts on that, or whether we should brainstorm a little about that.
I would welcome the brainstorming on that. I think that would be great, and hopefully we'll be able to have an opportunity to have business cards and to have those on the back of those business cards. So we'll be ready for them when the time comes. So I would welcome that.
One of the things I know that I enjoyed reading when I first went to the WeDrawTheLines.com website was all of the commissioners' quotes. I thought those were well done and informative, and kind of gave a picture of not only the mission of the commission, but also told you a little bit about each individual. So I think that would be something at least worth considering.
You're referring to the first 8 of us, our comments? Or
yeah, everybody's got them on there now, I think.
Oh,
other
okay.
than Commissioner Anchetta. But yeah, everyone's crafted a little quote.
We didn't craft it, by the way. They chose it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, they took it out of our essays.
And I thought I knew you.
Yeah, no, we didn't choose it, and I remember being pretty, interested in what they chose.
In what you said.
I mean, it was something.
Well, I chose mine.
Yeah, no, they didn't give us a choice. They did it for us.
Well, that's good to know. I'd like to then ask this question: is everyone happy with the quote that appears? And
I've looked.
It's quite good, Stanley.
I mean, I might have picked something else, but it was totally fine because it was something I said. So I didn't have a problem with it. But what I was thinking we might brainstorm a little bit is actually a tagline for, to kind of encapsulate what we're trying to do here. I mean, I think the We Draw the Line site, you can actually bring it up since you have a wireless card. Isn't it something like real power for... there's something
real power for real people.
Real power for real people, which is a little vague, in my opinion. So I'm wondering if we might want to come up with something that, I mean, it sounds good, but what does that really mean? So, I wonder if we want to craft something and maybe do a little brainstorming in this group here. That would be kind of a short and sweet kind of tagline that we could.
Well, there's one that I quote out of Prop 11. Essentially, it's you pick the politicians. Don't let the politicians pick you.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. I mean, and that's a Prop 11 slight paraphrase, but that's what it amounts to.
Yeah, and I actually like that. It's something I've used a lot in talking to the media about contrasting the previous process versus the current one, which is, this is fundamentally about democracy. So I think that's a good one to explore. I think the concept of fairness and equity would be good if we could get that in there somewhere, or true representation, that idea.
I would probably not put equity in. I think fairness is a better term.
That would be fine with me. But I think if we try to work with actual concepts rather than, as a committee trying to come up with a tagline, then we can give, Rob something to work with, and he can give us some options. So what are some other ideas behind this?
Something that I used, and it's really sincerely the way I look at this, but is about the political future, or the future for the next generation. That idea that what we're doing is not just something we're doing in 2011, but that it's going to
have a legacy.
We hope that the results will carry forward.
Yeah, I like that. And I think this was embodied in the real people idea, but the whole concept of this is about citizens choosing their representatives. So the concept of, it's like you said, we're people just like you. So something that gets that citizens idea across.
This is what democracy is all about. I mean,
A tagline I heard in speaking to the Chapman College Republicans was politics unusual. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Politics
Unusual.
Politics unusual made politics usual, because we're changing what we're doing. Just a variation.
Yeah.
This should not be unusual.
Yeah.
And the very fact it is says a lot.
It does. I mean, it's something that really struck me, that this has been going on for, hundreds of years.
Yeah, I mean,
and it seems like such an obvious flaw in the process to have, elected officials draw their own districts. And it seems amazing to me that it's taken a couple hundred years.
well, it's fascinating to me to hear that the incumbent protection was one of the criteria. I'm going,
Oh, yeah.
what?
Yeah. So, other concepts that we want to kind of get in there.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the real power for real people is not bad. But to me, it raises more questions than anything else.
So let's look at some of those key words again, because to go along with fairness, what are some of just key words that you think that describe what the commission is and what people should see the commission as?
Well, we use I think we're reaching a point where transparency is like, okay. Heard that one too many times. So if there's some way, some other word we can use that conveys the openness of our process, our openness.
The sunlight on the process,
Almost an open source process.
It also returns to the public a democratic process.
Yeah, the idea of true representation.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that we are supposed to be representative democracy, and it's gotten away from us.
Yeah. Also, I think that the commission has the need to hear from the public, somehow conveying that we're not doing this in a vacuum.
Right.
It's designed for the public to participate.
This is your process. I mean, you're the ones who passed Prop
People's
11.
process.
Another word I'd throw out then with that is also an inclusive process.
Yes.
'Cause it was
Yeah.
a very exclusive process before, and now it's a very inclusive one.
Inclusive. And that is probably, is a different way of getting at the transparency
Yes.
idea. Because it's not just the fact that you can see what we're doing,
Yeah.
but that you're also part of it.
Be part of it.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
so
that's
the
a good comment.
transparency is a necessity to be inclusive, but inclusiveness is really what we're going
That's
after.
right. And I couldn't agree more about the buzzword that it's become, transparency, that it's overused so much that has become meaningless because people think they need to say it, and what does it really mean?
I think based off of public comments that we heard 2 weeks ago and things like that, I think a emphasis on the breadth of accessibility that the Commission has would be something that's needed.
Accessible.
Any other kind of key words or key concepts that,
Be sure
shoehorn in
to
there.
translate.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Good suggestion. Good check.
Because I think on the back, if we're going to have a phrase like this, on the back of the business card, it needs to be either the cards need to be rotated, so
Right.
you've got so many cards in different languages, or they need to be 3 or 4 different languages on the back of each card for that same phrase.
Yeah, and keep in mind that really good translation is rarely word-for-word translation.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's okay if it's a slightly different tweak in a different language if it has a better, it means something deeper in a different language.
And then also maybe the message that we are listening. We are listening to you. You are being heard. Because
Yes.
that, and I think is...
The commission is in the building. I remember a middle schooler's campaign slogan was, "A vote for me is a vote for you." So I thought it was kind of cute in middle school, but that's kind of also I think what we're trying to say to the public. So I'm sure there must be an artful way to do that. But
Right, and it's come up in conversations with commissioners that when you talk to the public and you say, "I am you," essentially that message is so effective.
Actually, we have a couple members of the public here. I certainly invite you guys to help us brainstorm. We've had our first Public Information Advisory Committee was highly interactive. We were just sitting around a table. So please don't let this format inhibit you from coming forward if you have a good suggestion for us, because we're just brainstorming right now.
Well, not on this particular topic, but I have some suggestions about participation.
Excellent. We'll get to that. Other kind of key concepts, or do we feel like we have enough to pack in a few words?
It's got to be a very big business card.
yeah, really.
Well, we're at 15 after, and if I could plead for a bio break.
You were going to try to get
like
me
that.
back on that.
Let's make sure that's on the record. First time ever.
Okay, let's break for, can we make it 10 minutes?
Great.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, careful, careful.
Not forgotten.